The sky above the city was not the one Doom Slayer knew. Gone were the barren reds and blacks of Mars, replaced by the dull gray of skyscrapers and the sickly yellow haze of urban pollution. Sirens screamed in the distance, weaving through the dense, cacophonous streets below. It was a world that smelled of oil, fear, and the faint, sweet tang of manufactured heroism. A heroism Doom Slayer recognized as inherently corrupted. He landed hard, his boots splintering asphalt, the heavy hum of his Predator suit settling into a new frequency as it assessed the unfamiliar environment. Every sensor, every HUD interface was alive with readings foreign to his experience. Human thermals, rudimentary firearms, and something amplified, pervasive, unnatural, soups. He had come through a rift that no man should have opened, pulled from one war-torn reality into another. One moment he was tearing through hell's armies. The next he was falling into a city where people called flying men and women heroes, while the bodies of innocents piled up as collateral. Doom Slayer had faced demons, ancient gods, and cosmic horrors, yet there was an immediate, visceral hatred in him for what he saw here. These heroes were no saviors. They were predators cloaked in PR, their power unchecked, their morality negotiable, and their destruction excused. He adjusted the armor, the weight settling comfortably across shoulders and back, and he began moving. The first encounter came faster than expected. On the crowded avenue ahead, a group of teenagers ran screaming, a blur of superhuman speed chasing them through the traffic. Doom's targeting system lit up. Enhanced musculature, energy signatures inconsistent with human physiology, and an aura of reckless confidence. Civilians screamed as the heroes trampled cars, leaving shattered glass in their wake. The Slayer didn't hesitate. He drew the super shotgun, feeling the comforting heft of the weapon, and sprinted toward the fray with terrifying precision. Bullets, punches, and concussive blows collided in a symphony of chaos. Doom Slayer's movements were a blur, a study in lethal efficiency. He didn't fight to win alone. He fought to protect the innocents, to punish the ones abusing their power. One Soups launched toward him, fists glowing with some energy variant, perhaps derived from chemical augmentation or genetic manipulation. Doom rolled to the side, barely avoiding impact, and countered with a brutal uppercut, sending the Soup skidding across the pavement into a billboard. Another attempted to ambush him from above, but a precise shot from the shotgun tore through the air, severing a limb and scattering the attacker into the concrete below. The crowd stared in a mix of awe and horror. Doom Slayer's presence was immediate and terrifying, a tangible shift in the balance of power. Unlike Soups, he did not flaunt his abilities, nor did he pause for theatrics. Every movement was calculated, every strike final. The sound of his armor hydraulics punctuated the city's cacophony, creating an almost musical rhythm of destruction. Civilians ran, screaming. Yet in a curious turn, some paused to watch, recognizing, even subconsciously, the arrival of a force unbound by corporate sanction or media spin. The first Soup fell, the second staggered, and within moments, Doom Slayer had neutralized the immediate threat. He surveyed the area, his helmet's HUD scanning for further danger. There were more like them, but unlike hell, these adversaries were unorganized, chaotic, and dangerously arrogant. Doom Slayer felt a grim satisfaction in that, the arrogance of power without purpose or honor. His eyes, behind the visor, narrowed. He had a mission, even if the rift had brought him here by accident. Eliminate threats, protect the defenseless, and leave no remnant of corruption intact. But Doom was not blind to the wider implications. The city reacted almost instantly. Sirens changed pitch as police units mobilized, seemingly uncertain whether the Slayer was a threat or a savior. Hovering cameras flashed to life, recording every strike, every act of violence, broadcasting across networks. Doom Slayer was aware of the lens, the invisible eyes of media and corporate oversight. Yet he ignored it. The weight of responsibility had never been mediated by public opinion. He did what was necessary, nothing more, nothing less. The first hint of organized opposition arrived shortly after. A large transport descended from the sky, emblazoned with a familiar emblem, Vought International. Their wings bore the unmistakable insignia, their weapons gleaming with advanced tech. But Doomslayer could see the flaws immediately. Tactical training did not match real-world combat experience. Soups and suits could barely aim under pressure, relying on reputation rather than skill. Still, Doom approached with caution. Even a flawed soup could end his mission if underestimated. A figure detached from the transport, hovering above with an unnatural calm, radiating confidence and control. Homelander. The name whispered through the chaos of Doomslayer's sensors as he registered the threat. This was no ordinary soup. The energy signature was intense, nearly overwhelming. Unlike the reckless street-level soups, Homelander exuded discipline and power refined to a deadly edge. Doom assessed flight, strength, heat vision, tactical intelligence. Calculations ran through his HUD. This opponent required full capacity, full ruthlessness. Failure was unacceptable. Yet Doomslayer understood another layer. The civilians. Any direct confrontation in this environment risked collateral damage on a scale he rarely faced. In Hell, collateral was often necessary. But here, innocence had no protection against Soup's whims. Doom's rage and precision were tempered by necessity. He would strike with surgical finality, not indiscriminate fury. His strategy formed instantly. Assess, prioritize, incapacitate, extract threat, minimize collateral. Before he could act, another faction emerged. The boys. Billy Butcher, Huey, and Frenchie came forward, guns raised, tension thick in the air. Their approach was cautious, wary, as if they had seen this level of power before and perhaps feared it. But they also understood the Slayer's intent. His actions had already saved dozens of lives, something even they could not ignore. Their alliance was tentative, born of necessity rather than trust. They stepped between the Slayer and Homelander, shouting warnings and attempting negotiation, their combined presence a chaotic counterpoint to Doom's silent, mechanical authority. The Slayer paused, processing their behavior. Unlike Soups, these humans understood strategy, risk, and consequence. They operated in shades of gray, willing to cross moral lines to achieve results. Doom recognized an echo of his own methodology here. Mission first, politics later. Morality a tool rather than a chain. He did not lower his weapon, but did not fire. Observation, assessment, patience. His instincts honed over countless battles in countless realities dictated that this was the moment to gather intel before action. Amid the cacophony, civilians still fled, their screams a constant reminder of the stakes. Doomslayer's HUD tracked every movement. Soups, humans, vehicles, potential hazards. Each decision tree was calculated with ruthless efficiency. For the first time in centuries of combat, he faced opponents with powers rivaling or exceeding his own, but with one critical difference. Their moral compass was broken, corrupted by fame, corporate profit, or simple ego. This world required adaptation, not brute force alone. Doomslayer stepped forward slowly, his presence alone demanding attention. Homelander hovered, assessing, scanning, confident yet aware of a formidable challenge unlike any he had faced. The boys flanked the Slayer, tense but resolute, ready to leverage any tactical advantage. Civilians scattered, media drones whirring above, recording the impending confrontation. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, aware of the collision about to unfold. A voice came over comms, tinny and distant. Vought command to all units. Engage at discretion. Subject unknown. Extreme caution advised. Doomslayer registered it, but paid it no mind. The operational parameters of this world were foreign, but irrelevant to his purpose. He was the reckoning incarnate, a storm of violence with a singular focus. The boys recognized this instinctively, their tension giving way to strategic coordination. The first move was subtle. Doom did not attack outright. Instead, he advanced, weapon at the ready, every motion deliberate. Homelander shifted, testing his reaction, sending a blast of heat vision into the street. Doom rolled, using the environment for cover, and countered with a precise shot that disarmed but did not kill, a calculated warning. The air vibrated with energy and tension, a war of intent rather than fully realized combat. As the confrontation escalated, civilians peeked from behind overturned vehicles, watching the stranger who moved like a demon but fought for them. Rumors would spread later, a man in armor unstoppable, who arrived from nowhere to punish the corrupt and protect the helpless. Doomslayer, the Slayer of Worlds, had made his mark on Earth Prime. But this was only the beginning. He scanned the horizon. Vought's enforcers were mobilizing, Homelander's arrogance bristled, and the boys were cautious yet committed to an uneasy partnership. Doomslayer's mind calculated the variables, as he always did, forming a plan that combined brute force, tactical acumen, and moral clarity. Here, on a world not his own, he would set a precedent. Power used without purpose must be destroyed, and he would be the instrument. In that moment, Doomslayer understood the unspoken truth of this world. Heroes were not saviors. They were threats. Corporations and supes wielded destruction as theater, not consequence. And he, a warrior forged in war against the literal forces of hell, would bring balance through violence, precision, and unstoppable will. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. The city had already begun to feel the ripple effects of Doomslayer's arrival. Sirens wailed in a high-pitched chorus as emergency units scrambled to control the chaos. Yet their presence was nearly irrelevant. They lacked the training, coordination, and sheer resilience to contend with a force that operated on a level beyond human comprehension. Doomslayer moved through the streets with measured steps, each footfall resonating through the asphalt like a warning drumbeat. Civilians either scattered or froze in awe, their eyes wide as the fully armored warrior passed. He was a machine of war, but one that fought for order, not spectacle. And that distinction set him apart from the so-called heroes who had dominated this world with nothing but unchecked power and self-serving bravado. Above the skyline, Homelander hovered, his cape fluttering like a dark banner in the polluted wind. His expression was one of barely contained irritation. Here was a man who neither flinched nor bowed, who moved with deadly precision and unwavering intent. The Slayer's presence disrupted the delicate balance of control that Vought had meticulously constructed. For decades, the corporation had spun narratives of infallible heroes, manipulating public perception, while the true cost of their power was paid in blood, fear, and shattered lives. Doomslayer made a mockery of all that, demonstrating that true power did not require a corporate mandate. It demanded skill, discipline, and uncompromising morality. The first significant clash occurred in a crowded intersection where civilians were trapped between a crumbling lamppost and a speeding soup, his body enhanced with chemical augmentation. The enhanced individual barreled forward with reckless abandon, fists glowing with kinetic energy, seemingly intent on maiming everyone in his path. Doomslayer's sensors calculated trajectories with millisecond precision. He dashed forward, armor hydraulics propelling him across the street, and struck the soup in the midsection with a concussive punch that sent the augmented human skidding across the asphalt. The impact was enough to incapacitate, not kill, a deliberate choice informed by the presence of bystanders. Before the Slayer could advance, another soup appeared, dropping from a hovering craft with unnatural grace. Their speed and reflexes were impressive, but Doom's combat algorithms adapted instantly. He drew a combat knife, using it to deflect an incoming strike and counter with a series of calculated blows that disarmed the attacker. Each movement was precise, minimal, and devastatingly effective. Civilians clutched each other, screaming, yet the Slayer's actions inadvertently shielded them, creating a corridor of survival amidst the chaos. From the rooftops, the boys observed the unfolding scene. Butcher's eyes narrowed, calculating the potential risks and benefits of engaging with Doomslayer. Here was a man who did not adhere to moral compromise, but instead operated on principle, raw judgment, and martial superiority. Huey's concern was palpable. He had seen too many innocent lives squandered in conflicts between supes and humans. But even he could recognize that Doomslayer's presence might be the turning point this city desperately needed. Frenchie adjusted his scope, eyes scanning for structural weaknesses and optimal positioning. Together, they formed a tense, uneasy alliance with the Slayer, knowing that trust would be earned through action rather than words. As the confrontation escalated, Vought's command center erupted into controlled chaos. Monitors flickered with live footage of Doomslayer neutralizing Supes with clinical efficiency. The executives debated strategies: deploy more Supes, attempt negotiation, or initiate a media blackout, but none could accurately predict the outcome. The Slayer's operational style defied their experience. He was neither swayed by propaganda nor intimidated by reputation. Each of his actions was a precise response to immediate threats, and that adaptability made him a variable they could neither control nor contain. Homelander descended from the sky, landing with an aura of controlled power. The air shimmered with the heat of his vision, and civilians scattered at his approach. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice carrying both curiosity and the implicit threat of annihilation. Doomslayer did not answer. Words were irrelevant. Action defined the measure of a warrior, and Doomslayer's mission was singular: eliminate threats to the defenseless. The encounter escalated, Homelander attempting to test Doom's reaction with a series of rapid strikes and heat beams. The Slayer anticipated each move, dodging and countering with fluidity that belied human limitations. The boys took the opportunity to engage strategically. Butcher fired precision rounds, creating diversions and openings, while Frenchie coordinated makeshift traps using environmental hazards. Huey, despite his nerves, provided real-time intelligence, calling out the positions and vulnerabilities of the Supes. Doomslayer adapted instantly, integrating human tactics with his own combat intuition. The combination of raw power, tactical genius, and methodical efficiency created a dynamic that Homelander had not encountered before. The urban environment itself became a battlefield. Concrete pillars, overturned vehicles, and fractured streets were weaponized by Doomslayer's strategic mind. He leveraged cover and verticality, striking from unexpected angles, using the city as both shield and weapon. Civilians who had remained frozen in terror now found pockets of relative safety behind these improvised barriers. The Slayer's awareness of collateral damage, though limited by his hell-forged instincts, demonstrated a rare consideration for human life that set him apart from the Supes he opposed. The first tangible moment of strategy came when Doomslayer neutralized a Supe attempting to collapse a high-rise structure. With a combination of superhuman strength and precision, he stabilized the building long enough for civilians to escape. The act was mechanical, almost emotionless, yet the effect was profound. It was a demonstration of controlled power, devastating when necessary, protective when required. The boys recognized the significance, noting that Doomslayer's intervention differed fundamentally from the reckless heroics or villainous actions typical in their world. Meanwhile, Vought executives grew increasingly desperate. Deploying additional Supes only fueled Doomslayer's momentum, as he adapted to each new threat with near-algorithmic efficiency. For every strike, diversion, or environmental manipulation, Doom had a countermeasure ready. Monitors displayed a relentless sequence of neutralizations, subduing enhanced humans with minimal fatalities but maximal incapacitation. Public perception began to shift, even in real time, as news drones captured the unfolding events. Doomslayer's actions defied narrative control, a raw variable that Vought could neither script nor suppress. Amid the chaos, Homelander attempted a psychological tactic. "You don't belong here," he said, voice cutting through the hum of the city. "You can't understand power in this world." Doomslayer's response was silent but unmistakable: movement. He closed the distance with precision, forcing Homelander into defensive maneuvers while simultaneously minimizing civilian exposure. Every strike, every block, every maneuver was a demonstration of controlled lethality. This was not bravado. It was warcraft distilled into pure execution. The boys began to see a pattern emerge. Doomslayer, despite being out of his native reality, operated with a clarity and focus unmatched by anyone in this universe. Where Supes relied on brute force and reputation, Doomslayer relied on adaptability, observation, and principle. The humans around him, Butcher, Huey, and Frenchie, adjusted their tactics to complement his, creating a synergy that amplified their collective effectiveness. It was a revelation. Perhaps this stranger, this man from another dimension, could tilt the balance of power not merely through strength, but through strategy. By the time the first wave of soups was neutralized, the streets bore the scars of combat. Craters pocked the asphalt, vehicles were overturned, and buildings bore the marks of collateral destruction. Civilians emerged cautiously, watching as Doomslayer stood amidst the chaos, his armor dented but operational, his presence commanding. There was no flourish, no showmanship, only readiness, vigilance, and purpose. The world had witnessed a force unlike any other, and the implications were immediate. The era of unchecked soups had been challenged, and the rules of engagement in this universe would never be the same. The boys approached Doomslayer, their expressions a mixture of respect and caution. Butcher spoke first, his tone edged with skepticism. "You're not like any of them," he said. "But you might just be what we need." Doom's sensors registered their intentions, recognizing competence, resolve, and shared objectives. The tentative alliance was formed, not out of camaraderie, but necessity. Doomslayer understood the potential. With these humans, he could leverage his presence to dismantle systemic corruption, target dangerous soups, and protect the vulnerable. Above, Homeland watched, his confidence shaken for the first time in years. Doomslayer was not a typical threat. He was methodical, precise, and unyielding. His approach combined instinct, strategy, and moral clarity in ways that no soup could anticipate. The game had changed. The boys, for the first time, sensed that the balance of power in their world was not merely challenged. It was at risk of being overturned entirely. In the streets, civilians whispered tales of the armored warrior, glimpsed fleetingly as he neutralized threats with surgical efficiency. Some fled in terror, others in awe, but all recognized that the rules of engagement had changed. Doomslayer's arrival was more than a disruption. It was an awakening. Vought had underestimated the consequences of being unbound by narrative, unshackled by corporate mandates, and uncompromising in pursuit of justice through action. As the dust settled and the first wave of chaos dissipated, Doomslayer scanned the city, his HUD mapping threats, potential allies, and areas of concern. The boys fell into step beside him, tentative but resolute. Civilians cautiously emerged from cover, and the first murmurs of media attention began to circulate. Doomslayer's presence was no longer a rumor, it was a reality, and the world would soon have to reckon with what had arrived in their midst, a warrior from another reality, unstoppable, principled, and utterly uncompromising. The tremors of Doomslayer's arrival rippled far beyond the city streets, where he had first manifested. Vought International's command centers were in uproar, with executives and soup handlers scrambling to assess the scope of the threat. Their screens displayed footage of the Slayer's methodical neutralization of enhanced individuals, each action a blow not only to their operatives, but to the carefully curated narrative of untouchable heroes. Monitors flickered with images of civilians shielded amidst destruction, a testament to the Slayer's precision and ruthless discipline. Vaught's PR machinery immediately recognized the existential danger. Here was a force that could not be controlled, bought, or intimidated. This was a variable they had not accounted for in any contingency plan. In their sterile glass and steel war rooms, Vought strategists debated the implications. CEO Stan Edgar leaned forward, his face a mask of calm, though tension coiled beneath his veneer. "If this entity continues unchecked," he said, "our soups will appear impotent. We cannot allow the public to see them fail." The term entity was deliberate. Doomslayer was beyond their classification of human or superhuman. His armor, weaponry, and precision suggested a hybrid of technological mastery and physical augmentation beyond anything they had encountered. But Edgar's advisors were split. Some argued for immediate elimination, while others proposed capturing him, studying his abilities, and weaponizing the outcome. Edgar's calm, calculated voice cut through. "We prepare for both outcomes. Contain if possible, neutralize if necessary. And do not underestimate him." Meanwhile, Doomslayer had moved silently through the urban sprawl, his sensors scanning for anomalies in the environment. The Slayer's experience in Hell had honed him to detect threats that others could not perceive. Here, though the stakes were human, the level of danger was no less significant. Supes, government agents, and corporate operatives represented variables akin to demons and warlords he had faced in countless campaigns. Each was evaluated for lethality, predictability, and adaptability. Doomslayer's internal calculus was relentless, iterative. Every encounter a series of decision trees, each with a singular priority: protect innocents, eliminate threats, and preserve operational integrity. The first formal engagement with the boys occurred when they intercepted him at the site of a damaged Vought facility. Butcher, ever pragmatic, approached with caution, raising his weapon but not aiming it directly. Huey stayed behind, eyes wide as he observed Doom's methodical inspection of the facility. Frenchie, curious and tactical, circled the perimeter. They had spent months fighting corrupt supes and corporate interference. But here was someone operating outside their moral calculus, yet aligned in objective. Doomslayer did not seek approval or allegiance. His recognition of the boys was purely functional. They were temporary assets, human variables capable of executing secondary objectives that complemented his strategy. Communication was minimal. Doomslayer spoke rarely, letting actions dictate understanding. A nod here, a gesture there, established coordination without redundancy. The boys had to adjust instantly. Their improvisational tactics meshed with Doom's precise and brutal execution. Together, they secured the facility, neutralizing traps, automated defenses, and rogue supe security measures. Doomslayer's combat acumen was evident in every movement. A blend of brute force, tactical ingenuity, and anticipatory strikes that minimized risk to non-combatants, while systematically eliminating threats. The boys watched, partially in awe, partially in disbelief, as the Slayer demonstrated a mastery of battlefield control they had never witnessed, even in operations against supes. In parallel, Vought escalated. Homelander, realizing the gravity of Doomslayer's threat, returned to confront him directly. His strategy combined raw power with psychological warfare, attempting to destabilize the Slayer through intimidation and theatrical displays. Heat vision cut through the streets, shattering walls and sending debris flying. Flight maneuvers kept civilians at risk, testing the Slayer's precision and patience. Doom responded with calculated countermeasures, using overturned vehicles as shields, timing shotgun blasts and melee strikes to neutralize threats without harming bystanders, and leveraging his knowledge of kinetic trajectories to predict Homelander's attacks. The ensuing battle demonstrated the fundamental differences between the two combatants. Homelander relied on overwhelming power and reputation. Doomslayer relied on experience, precision, and adaptability. Each strike, dodge, and counter was a micro-calculation. Where Homelander relied on intimidation, Doom relied on outcome certainty. Civilians began to understand, through the chaos and destruction, that Doomslayer was not a supe in the conventional sense. He was something else entirely. A force of nature, unbound by narrative, unrestrained by corporate oversight, and unwavering in moral execution. Meanwhile, the secondary factions emerged. Rogue elements within Vought, sensing both opportunity and threat, began deploying specialized supe units and drones to contain the Slayer. These operations were met with methodical dismantling. Doom's ability to integrate unfamiliar technology with his combat protocols allowed him to neutralize drones, repurpose weapons, and turn environmental hazards against his opponents. His approach to combat was not one of aggression alone, but of adaptability, turning each challenge into an opportunity for strategic dominance. The Slayer's effectiveness drew attention from other corners. Media outlets, initially hesitant, began broadcasting live footage of the confrontation. The narrative of infallible supes versus a lone, armored warrior captured public fascination. Reports highlighted Doom's precision, his protection of civilians, and the systematic dismantling of Vaught's operatives. Public perception began to shift subtly, recognizing that the soup's reputation was manufactured, and that a new, incorruptible force had arrived. Doomslayer did not seek recognition. It was a byproduct of his actions, not the purpose. But in this universe, perception could drive consequences, and Doom's methodology inadvertently undermined Vought's carefully curated image. In the midst of escalating conflict, a moral dimension arose. The boys, particularly Huey, questioned the Slayer's approach to engagement. Indiscriminate strikes and the ruthlessness of his combat style clashed with their measured, albeit morally flexible, human approach. Doomslayer recognized the tension, but operated on principle. His objective was clear: neutralize threats and protect innocence. The method, though extreme by human standards, was consistent with centuries of experience in environments where hesitation meant annihilation. For the boys, this was a lesson in efficiency and consequence, revealing both the potential and danger of operating with unflinching decisiveness. As the day progressed, the operational theater expanded. Doomslayer moved through the city, systematically neutralizing Soup's strongholds, disarming traps, and securing zones where civilians could evacuate safely. The boys coordinated secondary objectives, gathering intelligence, rescuing trapped civilians, and exploiting openings created by Doom's actions. The synergy was palpable, yet tenuous. Each human participant understood that Doomslayer's alliance was conditional. His loyalty was to mission, not camaraderie, and trust was earned through alignment of objectives rather than personal bonds. The first hints of strategy emerged as Vought attempted to consolidate forces. Specially trained Soup units, coordinated via advanced AI algorithms, were dispatched to create traps and ambushes. Doomslayer countered each with a combination of brute force and improvisation, demonstrating a capacity to adapt to dynamic threats beyond human predictive ability. The city itself became a chessboard, every street, alleyway, and rooftop transformed into an operational variable. Doom's mastery of battlefield control was not merely physical, it was intellectual, leveraging environmental manipulation, threat anticipation, and human-complemented tactics to maintain initiative. Homelander, frustrated by repeated setbacks, escalated psychologically. He attempted to exploit the human participants' emotional responses, targeting Huey and other civilians in indirect strikes. Doomslayer, recognizing the tactical significance, intercepted with precision, placing himself between threats and innocence, while systematically neutralizing danger. This action reinforced his emerging reputation. He was a shield, a weapon, and an unstoppable force, yet one guided by purpose rather than ego. As the day waned, Doomslayer's presence had irrevocably altered the dynamics of the city. Civilians survived where they would have perished. Vought's carefully constructed hierarchy was disrupted, and the Soups themselves were forced to adapt to a variable they could not predict. The boys, observing, began to understand the potential. Doomslayer could be a decisive agent in rebalancing a world dominated by corrupt power. Yet the Slayer's methodology remained uncompromising. Moral compromise was irrelevant. Only efficacy mattered. In a final display before nightfall, Doomslayer neutralized a coordinated strike by rogue Soups and Vought operatives attempting to collapse a civilian building. Using kinetic calculations, environmental manipulation, and precise strikes, he stabilized the structure, incapacitated threats, and ensured civilian safety. The boys were astonished, recognizing that Doom's approach combined precision, raw power, and adaptive intelligence in a way no Soup or human could rival. For the first time, they witnessed a warrior operating beyond narrative, beyond morality games, guided solely by principle and tactical supremacy. As night descended, the city lay in the aftermath of controlled chaos. Smoke curled from damaged buildings, emergency crews navigated rubble, and the Slayer's presence remained a lingering shadow across the urban landscape. Homelander retreated temporarily, his arrogance tempered by recognition of a superior strategist. The boys regrouped, acknowledging that the arrival of Doomslayer had shifted the balance irreversibly. Civilians whispered tales of a mysterious armored warrior, a man of precision and unyielding will, who arrived without warning and imposed a new standard of consequence. Doomslayer, ever vigilant, scanned the horizon. Operational assessment indicated further threats, areas requiring neutralization, and potential opportunities for strategic advantage. His mission was clear: continue to dismantle the infrastructure of unchecked superhuman power, protect the defenseless, and maintain the initiative against a world unprepared for his methodology. The city had witnessed only the beginning of what a force unbound by narrative and untempered by corruption could achieve. The next morning, the city was alive with whispers of the Slayer's exploits. Social media exploded, hashtags trending with shaky footage captured by drones and terrified civilians. Hashtag Armored Avenger. Hashtag Man of Steel Will. Hashtag Doomwalker. It was an unprecedented disruption in the managed narrative of Vought International. For decades, the corporation had controlled the flow of information, presenting soups as flawless icons of moral superiority. Now those images were shattered by the live, unfiltered evidence of a force that operated outside their framework, a force that did not answer to PR teams, corporate directives, or public relations campaigns. Doomslayer was an agent of raw consequence, a variable that could not be contained or sanitized, and Vought's executives were well aware that the optics alone were catastrophic. Stan Edgar convened an emergency session in the command center. Monitors glared with live feeds of the Slayer's ongoing operations. "This being," Edgar said deliberately, emphasizing the detachment necessary to classify him, "cannot be negotiated with. He does not adhere to our systems, our protocols, or the societal structures we manipulate. He is uncontrollable." The room fell silent, advisors exchanging anxious glances. "Deploy specialized soups," Edgar continued. "Those capable of flight, enhanced strength, and tactical acumen. He must be contained before this escalates further." A hush fell, but beneath it lay a deep unease. Containment of a being like Doomslayer had never been attempted before, and failure was unacceptable. Meanwhile, Doomslayer moved through the city with an almost supernatural efficiency. Reports of a soup using civilians as bait reached his sensors. The Slayer's response was immediate and uncompromising. Unlike the superpowered individuals who relied on spectacle and intimidation, Doom calculated trajectories, environmental variables, and the psychological state of the aggressor. He moved with precision, intercepting the soup mid-assault, neutralizing them without collateral fatalities. The civilians were unharmed, though their terror was palpable. To them, he was less a savior than a judgment incarnate, unyielding, relentless, and terrifyingly effective. The boys intercepted Doom shortly afterward. A butcher, his brow furrowed, called out, "Oi, we need to talk, mate. Your style, reckless as it is, it's shaking the city apart. And if Vought catches wind before we get ahead, it'll be worse than any soup strike we've dealt with." Huey looked nervous, adjusting his jacket. "We're not here to tell you what to do, but there's nuance to consider. Collateral, optics, consequences." Doomslayer regarded them silently. Words were unnecessary. His actions had already conveyed intent. But he allowed them to observe, to provide intelligence and tactical support, not out of trust, but calculation. The alliance was practical, functional, and tense. Both sides aware that missteps could be fatal. Doomslayer's tactical acumen came to the forefront when they targeted a Vought warehouse, where rogue soups were conducting illegal augmentation experiments. The warehouse was fortified with advanced technology, automated turrets, reinforced walls, and security personnel enhanced with chemical and genetic modifications. Doom analyzed the situation with precision. Every entry point, every patrol route, every potential hazard was cataloged and assessed. He provided coordinates and risk assessments for the boys, allowing them to optimize their engagement while he spearheaded the assault. The combination of Slayer efficiency and human improvisation created a synergy that quickly overwhelmed the defenses. Inside, the Slayer moved like a shadow of controlled violence. Automated defenses were neutralized with calculated precision. Enhanced soup operatives attempted to intercept, relying on brute strength and reckless aggression. Doom's response was swift and merciless, a series of strikes, blocks, and counters that incapacitated each assailant without undue damage to the environment or civilians inadvertently trapped in adjacent zones. The Slayer's ability to adapt, anticipate, and execute operations in unfamiliar technological and tactical conditions was a stark contrast to the Soup's reliance on power and intimidation. Meanwhile, Vought attempted to coordinate a larger response. Homelander returned, determined to confront the Slayer directly, his composure a mask over a growing unease. He had underestimated the level of strategy, adaptability, and lethal efficiency Doom brought to the battlefield. His heat vision struck the walls, attempting to disrupt structural integrity and force Doom into reactive maneuvers. But the Slayer calculated angles, velocity, and energy dispersion, minimizing exposure while advancing relentlessly. Each movement was purposeful, every strike executed to achieve maximum operational advantage. The confrontation escalated into a tactical dance. Doomslayer anticipated Homelander's maneuvers, using environmental cover, calculated counters, and controlled force to neutralize attacks. The boys provided support through diversion, intelligence, and tactical intervention, though they understood their role was secondary. Doom's dominance in the engagement was evident. He combined the precision of advanced combat algorithms with raw, unyielding strength, creating a presence that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The Slayer's approach was not indiscriminate brutality. Each action was a calculated risk, designed to neutralize the immediate threat while preserving the lives of innocents. The juxtaposition was striking. Where Soups often caused collateral damage without consequence, Doomslayer mitigated risk through methodical execution and tactical foresight. Civilians who observed the engagement began to understand the distinction. Doomslayer was not a hero in the conventional sense, nor a villain. He was an agent of consequence, operating outside the moral ambiguity that defined this world. At the warehouse's core, Doomslayer encountered the lead operative, a chemically enhanced superhuman with reactive armor and adaptive combat instincts. The engagement tested Doom's full capacity. The operative was fast, strong, and relentless, mirroring the Slayer's intensity. Yet Doom's experience, honed through centuries of combat against adaptive, intelligent adversaries, provided the edge. He analyzed attack patterns, exploited openings, and combined lethal force with precise incapacitation, ultimately neutralizing the operative with minimal structural damage. The aftermath of the warehouse raid reverberated immediately. Vought's operations had been disrupted, experimental enhancements destroyed, and their public image compromised. Doomslayer's intervention left the facility in ruins, but with civilians largely unharmed, a stark contrast to the narrative Vought had attempted to craft around Soup's heroism. For the boys, the implications were clear. Doom was not merely a weapon. He was a disruptor, capable of altering the balance of power in ways previously unimagined. Public perception began to shift subtly. Footage of Doomslayer's methodical intervention spread online, emphasizing his precision, restraint, and effectiveness. Citizens began to question the reliability, morality, and accountability of the Soups, who had previously dominated the media narrative. Vought recognized the threat to their carefully maintained image, escalating internal panic. The Slayer had proven that power untempered by principle could be neutralized, and that strategic, decisive action could challenge even the most entrenched institutions. The Slayer's tactical mastery extended beyond physical engagement. He began mapping the city, identifying Soup's strongholds, and assessing vulnerabilities in Vought's infrastructure. The boys coordinated secondary operations, extracting civilians, gathering intelligence, and disrupting supply lines. Doom's methodology emphasized containment and neutralization, ensuring each step advanced the overarching objective without unnecessary exposure. The collaboration, though functional, remained tense. Doomslayer's focus was unwavering, his alignment strictly operational rather than relational. As night fell, the operational picture became clearer. Doom had systematically disrupted Vought's immediate capabilities, neutralized high-threat targets, and preserved civilian life. Homelander, temporarily retreating, recognized the emergence of a new equilibrium, one dictated by precision, adaptability, and lethal efficiency. Doomslayer had proven that narrative, reputation, and unchecked power could be challenged effectively, and that consequence, not spectacle, defined true dominance in conflict. In the aftermath, the boys regrouped with Doomslayer. Butcher's tone was measured but filled with begrudging respect. "You've got a way of making an entrance and leaving a mark," he said. Huey's voice was quieter, reflective, acknowledging the Slayer's impact on civilian preservation. Frenchie analyzed operational outcomes, already considering how future engagements could integrate Doom's methodology with their improvisational tactics. The tentative alliance solidified not through trust, but mutual recognition of strategic necessity. Doomslayer, as always, remained vigilant. Sensors scanned the horizon, calculating residual threats, potential reinforcements, and environmental hazards. His operational mandate was clear: continue neutralizing dangerous soups, dismantle corrupt structures, and maintain initiative. The city had begun to adapt to his presence, but Doomslayer understood that the balance was precarious, and that the next phase of engagement would test his capacity, his strategy, and the tenuous alliance he maintained with human actors in an unfamiliar reality. The city's uneasy calm did not last long. News of Doomslayer's presence had spread like wildfire, triggering a cascade of reactions across both Vought International and the superpowered community. The public, initially stunned by reports and shaky footage, began to debate and speculate. Was this armored figure a new hero? A demon? A harbinger of change? The Slayer himself cared little for perception, yet every observer, every camera lens, and every citizen caught a glimpse became part of a larger, unfolding consequence. In this universe, reputation was as lethal a weapon as raw power, and Doomslayer's very existence was beginning to destabilize the carefully constructed illusions of Vought. Vought moved swiftly, deploying a coordinated strike team of their most capable soups. They were trained, disciplined, and reinforced with advanced equipment designed to maximize combat efficiency. Yet all of their experience in PR-driven heroism could not prepare them for a warrior forged in hellish crucibles of war and equipped with a mind optimized for lethal strategy. Doomslayer's sensors detected the incoming threat long before it reached striking distance, analyzing energy signatures, potential trajectories, and operational priorities. Every parameter was logged, every calculation refined in real time. The first wave of engagement would not merely be a battle. It would be a demonstration of control, adaptability, and tactical superiority. The engagement began in the shattered remains of a downtown plaza. Soups descended from hovering crafts, their confidence radiating in the form of arrogance and lethal energy. Doomslayer did not hesitate. He advanced with calculated steps, using cover and verticality to minimize exposure while maximizing control over the battlefield. His weapons were a blend of brute force and precision. Shotgun blasts to neutralize immediate threats, the combat knife for close-quarters disruption, and kinetic strikes designed to incapacitate without unnecessary destruction. The urban environment became an extension of his combat strategy. Every building, vehicle, and debris pile transformed into a tactical tool. The soups, trained in traditional combat augmented by superhuman abilities, underestimated the Slayer's adaptability. One attempted a frontal assault, relying on raw strength to overwhelm him. Doom sidestepped with fluid precision, countering with a concussive strike that sent the attacker hurtling into a reinforced street barrier. Another tried an aerial flanking maneuver, launching from a nearby rooftop. Doom's response was anticipatory, a shotgun blast calculated for trajectory and timing, neutralizing the threat midair. Civilians screamed and scattered, but Doom's precision ensured no fatalities, a stark contrast to the reckless, collateral-heavy assaults typical of these soups. The boys were positioned strategically around the plaza. Butcher provided suppressive fire, creating openings and distractions. Huey monitored civilian safety and threat vectors, providing intelligence updates. Frenchie exploited environmental vulnerabilities and offered tactical guidance. Their coordination with Doomslayer, while informal and tense, demonstrated the potency of combining human ingenuity with otherworldly combat mastery. Doom did not rely on verbal commands. His presence, actions, and calculated movements dictated the flow of engagement. The boys adapted, following his cues, optimizing their efforts without disrupting his operational intent. Amid the chaos, Homelander arrived, descending with the same composed arrogance that had marked all his previous encounters. "You don't belong here," he said, voice cutting through the ambient noise of destruction and panic. "This is my city, my rules." Doomslayer did not respond with words. He had no need. His eyes scanned through the HUD of his armor, assessed threat level, energy output, and potential consequences. Each calculation informed his movements, ensuring that engagement was optimized for effectiveness and minimal collateral damage. The clash was immediate and brutal. Homelander's heat vision cut through the plaza, shattering concrete and sending vehicles tumbling. Doom countered with precision movements, using his environment to shield civilians while closing the distance to engage in direct combat. Each strike, each block, and each counter was executed with a calculated finality. Homelander's raw power was undeniable, but Doomslayer's tactical acumen, experience in adaptive combat, and unyielding discipline created a dynamic the Supes had never encountered. A battle of precision, anticipation, and ruthless efficiency rather than sheer destructive force. As the fight escalated, the Slayer demonstrated an unconventional approach to engagement. Instead of merely overpowering, he manipulated the battlefield. Overturned vehicles became barriers. Exposed utility lines created diversions. Debris from destroyed Supes and structures were used to funnel opponents into disadvantageous positions. Doom's actions were deliberate, controlled, and almost surgical. Civilians who had previously fled began to recognize the difference between the Slayer's method and the reckless violence of other Supes. He was a protector, but one defined by uncompromising judgment rather than spectacle. During a critical moment, Homelander attempted a direct assault aimed at civilians to force Doom into a reactive posture. The Slayer anticipated the tactic, intercepting with kinetic force and precise displacement, neutralizing the immediate threat while maintaining offensive pressure on Homelander. The calculated interplay of defense and attack demonstrated Doom's unparalleled situational awareness and mastery over complex, multivariable engagements. The boys observing and participating were forced to recognize the Slayer's operational superiority, adjusting their own tactics to complement his unyielding rhythm. Vought's remaining operatives scrambled to coordinate reinforcements. They deployed drones, automated turrets, and enhanced Supes designed to overwhelm through numbers. Yet Doomslayer's methodology was unshaken. Every wave of attack was neutralized through a combination of predictive modeling, environmental manipulation, and calculated strikes. Each engagement further destabilized Vought's control and public perception, as footage leaked online showing a figure systematically dismantling their operations with ruthless efficiency and minimal civilian casualties. By mid-afternoon, the city's landscape bore the marks of sustained conflict. Streets were littered with debris, buildings bore scars from combat, and the population was both terrified and awed. Doomslayer remained a constant, moving through the chaos with singular focus, neutralizing high-threat Supes, disarming traps, and establishing zones of safety for civilians. The boys continued to coordinate, their improvisation blending seamlessly with Doom's precision. The operational synergy, though tenuous and dictated by necessity, had become a force multiplier capable of challenging the dominance of Supes in a manner previously unimaginable. In the aftermath of the primary engagements, Doomslayer surveyed the battlefield. His sensors detected residual threats, rogue operatives attempting to regroup, and structural vulnerabilities that could pose future risks. Strategic assessment became the next priority. Neutralize remaining high-threat targets, secure key zones, and prevent Vought from re-establishing dominance before public perception solidified against them. Each decision was executed with calculated efficiency, balancing lethal force, operational necessity, and the protection of innocence. A pivotal moment occurred when Doomslayer encountered a chemically enhanced Supe attempting to detonate an improvised explosive device in a crowded sector. Time was measured in seconds. Doom calculated trajectory, energy output, and structural stability, intercepting the threat with precision. The explosive was disarmed, the operative neutralized, and civilians evacuated. The outcome reinforced the operational principle that had guided Doom's intervention. Measured, calculated, and effective action could achieve results that brute power alone could not. The boys, witnessing this, began to internalize the Slayer's methodology. Butcher muttered in begrudging admiration, "Never met anyone who moves like that, precise, deadly, and doesn't care about showing off." Huey, absorbing the operational lessons, recognized the value of integrating strategic planning with adaptive improvisation. Frenchie noted tactical innovations that could be applied to future operations. The informal alliance had evolved. Doomslayer was not merely a force of intervention. He had become a catalyst for recalibrating human resistance against the soup's dominance. As night approached, the city entered a tenuous state of stability. Doomslayer, ever vigilant, patrolled zones of high threat, neutralizing rogue elements, and securing civilian corridors. The boys maintained support roles, providing intelligence, diversion, and operational flexibility. Civilians cautiously began to emerge from hiding, observing the armored figure who had reshaped their perception of power, consequence, and heroism. Homelander retreated temporarily, acknowledging, perhaps for the first time, that Doomslayer was a combatant and strategist beyond his capacity to predict or control. In a quiet moment atop a high-rise, Doomslayer scanned the cityscape. Operational assessment indicated residual threats, potential targets for neutralization, and areas where strategic advantage could be exploited. His calculations were relentless, adaptive, and uncompromising. The Slayer's presence had not only disrupted Vought's control, but had established a new operational paradigm in the city, one dictated by consequence, precision, and unyielding principle. The following day brought new challenges. Vought International, now acutely aware of the threat Doomslayer posed, initiated a citywide lockdown. Security drones patrolled every street. Soups were deployed in staggered waves, and surveillance arrays scanned continuously for the armored interloper. Yet Doomslayer operated with the relentless precision of a predator, using the urban environment as an extension of his tactical systems. Each patrol, drone, and soup was evaluated in real time, their weaknesses mapped, and contingencies calculated with millisecond accuracy. Nothing in this world was beyond his operational understanding, though the unpredictability of human improvisation added a variable he continually accounted for. The Slayer's movements were methodical. He avoided direct confrontation where unnecessary, instead neutralizing high-risk threats with surgical precision. The city's infrastructure became both shield and weapon. Narrow alleys, crumbling walls, and precarious scaffolding were exploited to control engagements and funnel adversaries into advantageous positions. Civilians remained a priority. Unlike many soups in this universe, Doom's interventions prioritized safety without sacrificing operational effectiveness. The subtle balance between lethality and restraint became a defining trait, one that both terrified and inspired those who witnessed it. The boys continued to shadow him, each step a lesson in operational synergy. Butcher was vocal, issuing blunt assessments and suggestions that occasionally altered the Slayer's approach, though always secondary to his calculated plan. Huey served as a human sensor array, identifying civilian concentrations and predicting soup movements. Frenchie, ever analytical, adapted improvised tools and environmental hazards to enhance tactical outcomes. Their alliance, though uneasy and built on necessity rather than trust, had become functional, and together they created a hybrid force capable of countering the soup's raw, untempered power. Vought escalated the response, deploying a team of specially trained soups under the supervision of a high-ranking operative named Crimson. She had experience controlling enhanced humans in urban environments and understood the Slayer's threat required more than brute force. Her plan involved coordinated strikes, environmental manipulation, and psychological warfare designed to overwhelm his senses. Crimson's team moved with precision, using predictive algorithms and high-tech weaponry to anticipate Doomslayer's response. For the first time, he faced opponents who combined raw power with tactical discipline, creating a challenge that required full engagement of his skill and intellect. The confrontation occurred in the ruins of a partially collapsed bridge, a site chosen for strategic advantage. Crimson Soups attempted flanking maneuvers, establishing kill zones and layered defenses. Doom Slayer's sensors detected the pattern immediately. Calculations were made in microseconds. Energy output, trajectory prediction, environmental hazards, and potential civilian impact. With lethal efficiency, he neutralized the first wave, using concussive strikes and precision shots to incapacitate opponents without unnecessary fatalities. Each movement demonstrated mastery of battlefield control, adaptive tactics, and an unflinching commitment to mission objectives. Crimson, observing Doom's methodical dismantling of her team, escalated the assault. She used enhanced speed and kinetic projection, attempting to exploit any hesitation or overextension. Doom countered with anticipation, leveraging environment and kinetic energy to neutralize attacks, redirect force, and maintain initiative. Their engagement was not merely physical. It was an intricate interplay of prediction, adaptation, and execution. Each strike and counter was informed by tactical analysis, past experience, and the Slayer's unyielding operational doctrine. Amidst the chaos, civilians who had taken refuge nearby watched in awe. For the first time, they witnessed a figure capable of challenging Soups without succumbing to collateral devastation. Doomslayer's actions were brutal, precise, and unrelenting, yet they prioritized life where possible, a stark contrast to the reckless behavior of many Soups in the universe. The image of the armored warrior became a symbol of consequence, discipline, and accountability, resonating in a city accustomed to chaos masquerading as heroism. The boys played critical support roles. Butcher engaged in direct disruption, drawing attention and creating tactical openings. Huey provided real-time civilian intelligence, ensuring Doom's interventions did not inadvertently harm innocents. Frenchie manipulated environmental variables, deploying improvised traps and distractions. Together, they formed a dynamic network, amplifying Doomslayer's effectiveness while learning from his approach. Their alliance evolved into a symbiotic system, human improvisation and Slayer precision operating as a single, adaptive unit. Crimson, realizing conventional engagement was ineffective, attempted a psychological tactic. "You can't win," she shouted, exploiting the Slayer's lack of verbal response and humanizing her attack with taunts. Doomslayer did not react emotionally. His sensors and neural computation filtered irrelevant stimuli. Actions dictated outcomes, not words. In response, he executed a coordinated sequence of strikes that incapacitated Crimson's team systematically, leveraging environmental hazards, kinetic redirection, and brute force with surgical precision. By the conclusion of the engagement, Crimson herself was neutralized, incapacitated rather than killed, demonstrating Doom's capacity for controlled judgment amidst lethal efficiency. Vought's reputation suffered further. Leaked footage of the engagement circulated rapidly, showing Doomslayer neutralizing Soups with unprecedented efficiency, preserving civilian life, and dismantling coordinated operations. The public perception began to shift irrevocably. Soups were no longer infallible. Corporate-controlled heroes could be challenged. Doomslayer's presence catalyzed a growing awareness of accountability, consequence, and the potential for human, or in this case, cross-dimensional intervention to recalibrate power dynamics. Doomslayer's operational assessment extended beyond immediate threats. He mapped potential strategic targets, predicted Vought's contingency plans, and identified areas where Soups could regroup or civilians remained at risk. The boys, understanding the tactical significance, coordinated efforts to secure these zones, extract civilians, and gather intelligence. Each success further reinforced the efficacy of their collaboration, though Doom's methods remained uncompromising. Efficiency, lethality, and principle guided his actions above all else. The day culminated in a high-intensity confrontation on the rooftops of a downtown sector. Crimson had coordinated a last-ditch offensive, deploying an array of enhanced Soups and mechanized defenses designed to overwhelm and isolate Doom. The Slayer analyzed the battlefield instantly, identifying energy outputs, potential trajectories, and civilian proximity. He struck with precision, neutralizing threats systematically while exploiting environmental vulnerabilities to control movement and maintain advantage. Each engagement reinforced his dominance, adaptability, and operational mastery. As night fell, Doomslayer remained vigilant, patrolling the city to ensure threats were neutralized and civilians secured. The boys regrouped, analyzing outcomes and preparing for further operations. The city, scarred yet resilient, bore witness to a new paradigm. One where power was measured not by spectacle, arrogance, or narrative, but by consequence, precision, and unwavering discipline. Doomslayer had not merely disrupted Vought. He had redefined operational engagement, demonstrating that a force unbound by narrative, ego, or corruption could alter the balance of power irreversibly. In a quiet observation point, the Slayer surveyed the city. Operational analysis indicated residual threats, high-risk zones, and strategic opportunities for continued intervention. His mission was clear: neutralize dangerous soups, protect innocents, and dismantle structures of unchecked power. The Slayer's presence had already shifted the calculus of conflict in this universe, and the unfolding events promised further escalation, strategic complexity, and moral consequences that would challenge both soups and humans alike. The following morning, the city's tension was palpable. News outlets reported, often breathlessly, on Doomslayer's ongoing campaign, presenting footage of him neutralizing soups with surgical efficiency and an unrelenting focus on mission objectives. Public opinion was split. Some hailed him as a savior, others whispered about a vigilante whose methods bordered on terrifying, yet undeniable. Vought International, now reeling from a series of operational failures, scrambled to contain both the public narrative and the Slayer himself. The corporation's executives understood that Doom's presence was no longer a tactical problem alone. It was a systemic threat to their control over the superpowered hierarchy and the perception of invincibility they had carefully cultivated over decades. Stan Edgar convened an emergency strategic council in Vought Tower, the glass and steel spires reflecting the city below, a visual metaphor for the corporate empire now under siege. "This is no longer a simple containment issue," Edgar said, his voice measured but severe. "We are dealing with a being capable of executing highly complex operations with precision beyond any soup's capability. Our previous tactics, direct engagement, intimidation, PR manipulation, are ineffective. We must escalate." His lieutenants nodded, reviewing predictive models of Doomslayer's known movements, operational patterns, and tactical tendencies. Edgar continued, "Deploy a combined task force, soups, human operatives, and AI-directed combat drones. Layer the battlefield with environmental traps. Do everything necessary to regain initiative. Failure is unacceptable." Meanwhile, Doomslayer's sensors detected the escalation before it manifested. He had been mapping operational hotspots, predicting Vaught's adaptive responses, and establishing control points to ensure civilian safety. The arrival of reinforcements, enhanced soups, and mechanized defenses only intensified the operational calculus. Doom's approach was systematic. Neutralize high-threat targets first, maintain control over engagement zones, and exploit the environment to force enemy units into predictable patterns. His methodology emphasized anticipation, adaptability, and absolute precision, a direct counter to the chaotic aggression typically exhibited by the soups of this universe. The boys, now seasoned collaborators in the Slayer's operations, shadowed him closely. Butcher's tactical input focused on human improvisation and environmental disruption, providing real-time adjustments that complemented Doom's calculated approach. Huey monitored civilian movements, relaying critical information to ensure no innocents were caught in crossfire. Frenchie analyzed structural vulnerabilities and devised rapid interventions to redirect or disable mechanized threats. Together, they formed a hybrid operational unit, integrating human flexibility with Doomslayer's lethal precision. Each engagement reinforced the efficiency of this partnership while highlighting the tension between human improvisation and otherworldly calculation. The confrontation escalated in the industrial sector, a dense labyrinth of factories, warehouses, and narrow streets. Doomslayer navigated the terrain with methodical precision, using elevated vantage points, structural choke points, and improvised barriers to control the battlefield. Vought's forces attempted to converge, deploying Supes in coordinated waves designed to flank, overwhelm, and isolate him. Doom anticipated each maneuver, leveraging kinetic calculations, environmental manipulation, and precise strikes to neutralize threats while maintaining operational momentum. Civilians remained unharmed, yet the magnitude of Doom's efficiency and ruthlessness created a palpable tension in every street, alley, and rooftop. Among the opposing forces was a newly enhanced Supe named Apex, capable of extreme speed, regenerative capabilities, and kinetic projection. Apex's first assault was a blur of motion, designed to overwhelm Doom's capacity to react. The Slayer, however, adapted instantaneously. Microcalculations of trajectory, velocity, and energy dispersion allowed him to intercept and neutralize the attack with precise timing. A combination of concussive strikes, kinetic redirection, and environmental leverage incapacitated Apex without collateral fatalities. The engagement demonstrated Doom's capacity to neutralize Supes whose abilities exceeded the majority of human comprehension, reinforcing the emerging perception of him as a force beyond traditional measure. Vought, observing the repeated failures, initiated a psychological strategy aimed at destabilizing Doom's operational focus. Homelander returned, employing intimidation, manipulation, and indirect threats against civilians in an attempt to provoke an emotional reaction. Doomslayer, however, operated beyond typical human psychology. His focus remained unwavering. Each threat was analyzed as a tactical variable, not an emotional lever. Actions were executed with the precision of a centuries-trained warrior, ensuring mission objectives were maintained while minimizing risk to innocents. The boys continued to play critical supporting roles. Butcher deployed human distractions, drawing attention and creating operational openings. Huey tracked and coordinated evacuation routes, ensuring civilian safety. Frenchie exploited environmental hazards, deploying improvised devices to manipulate enemy movement and amplify Doom's effectiveness. Their collaboration created a multidimensional operational framework, blending human intuition with otherworldly precision. The synergy highlighted the tactical advantage of integrating diverse skill sets while maintaining a strict hierarchy of command dictated by the Slayer's expertise. The industrial sector became a crucible of strategic complexity. Doomslayer engaged in simultaneous conflicts across multiple axes, neutralizing high-threat Supes, dismantling mechanized defenses, and controlling movement patterns to force Vought's forces into predictable, exploitable positions. Each engagement reinforced his dominance in adaptive combat and situational awareness. Civilians, observing from secure vantage points, began to perceive him as a protector defined by consequence and principle rather than spectacle or narrative. In a critical juncture, Doom intercepted a coordinated ambush designed to exploit urban density. Enhanced Supes deployed with synchronized strikes attempted to trap him within a confined corridor. Using kinetic redirection, environmental manipulation, and microstrategic strikes, Doom neutralized each threat systematically, opening a path for civilian escape and maintaining operational superiority. The engagement showcased a level of battlefield mastery previously unseen in this universe, redefining the parameters of conflict and challenging the assumption that Supes were unbeatable forces. Vought's command structure, watching from a secure tower, struggled to maintain cohesion. Their strategies, while sophisticated in isolation, faltered against Doom's relentless adaptability and integrated approach. Every failed operation eroded confidence, creating fissures in coordination and communication. Doom's presence was not merely disruptive in a tactical sense. It destabilized Vought's command hierarchy, public image, and internal morale. The corporation realized that controlling or containing this new variable required unprecedented measures. Yet traditional strategies were proving ineffective. As the day waned, Doomslayer secured operational zones, neutralized residual threats, and ensured civilian safety. The boys regrouped with him atop a reinforced skyscraper, surveying the city below. Butcher, acknowledging the Slayer's operational mastery, said, "I'll admit it, mate, you're on another level. The way you move, think it's not human. We've got to adapt fast if we're going to keep up." Huey nodded, reflecting on the ethical implications of Doom's uncompromising methods. Frenchie analyzed structural and tactical outcomes, already calculating potential enhancements for future interventions. Doomslayer's assessment extended beyond the immediate battlefield. He calculated residual threats, potential soup reinforcements, and structural vulnerabilities, preparing for the next operational phase. His mission remained clear: dismantle the infrastructure of unchecked superhuman power, protect civilians, and maintain initiative. Each engagement reinforced his dominance, adaptability, and principle-driven approach, ensuring that Vought and its soups could no longer dictate the terms of conflict unchallenged. As night settled, the city lay in controlled chaos. Streets bore the marks of repeated engagement. Buildings were scarred but structurally intact. Civilians cautiously emerged, observing the armored figure whose presence had fundamentally altered the balance of power. Doomslayer, ever vigilant, monitored residual threats and potential operational opportunities, preparing for the next phase of engagement with unyielding focus. In the boy's eyes, he had become more than an ally. He was a catalyst, a force that redefined both strategy and morality in a world dominated by unchecked superhuman power. The following day, the conflict escalated beyond anything the city had previously endured. Doomslayer's previous operations had left Vought International scrambling, their forces demoralized and fractured. In response, Edgar authorized the deployment of a full-scale tactical strike, combining soups, mechanized units, and experimental energy weapons designed to neutralize Doomslayer's armored advantage. The corporation's public relations team had also begun to circulate propaganda, doctored footage of civilian endangerment, and exaggerated accounts of the Slayer's destructive potential. Yet Doom's operational analysis accounted for both physical threats and informational warfare. He recognized that controlling the battlefield extended beyond streets and rooftops. It encompassed narrative, perception, and consequence. The boys, having learned to anticipate Doom's strategic thinking, acted as operational liaisons. Butcher coordinated human and improvised responses, drawing attention and creating strategic openings. Huey focused on civilian evacuation and information gathering, providing real-time intelligence to minimize collateral risk. Frenchie manipulated the urban environment, deploying improvised diversions and tactical obstructions to complement Doom's movements. Their symbiosis with the Slayer had evolved from tentative coordination to a multi-layered operational framework, blending human ingenuity with calculated lethal precision. Vought's strike team launched their assault in a coordinated wave, utilizing enhanced soups with specialized abilities. One operative, a kinetic manipulator named Tremor, attempted to destabilize buildings and infrastructure to trap Doom in confined zones. Doom's response was immediate. Using microstrategic calculations, he anticipated structural shifts, redirected kinetic energy, and neutralized Tremor with precision. The Slayer's capacity to operate in multivariable combat environments was unmatched. Every threat, every environmental factor, and every civilian location was accounted for in real time. Homelander made a calculated appearance, his arrival intended to intimidate and destabilize the Slayer's operational focus. "You cannot control this city nor its people," he declared, eyes blazing with heat vision. Doomslayer, however, responded with unflinching composure. His movements were fluid, predictive, and lethal, each step designed to maintain battlefield control, neutralize threats, and safeguard innocence. Homelander's raw power, previously overwhelming to most opponents, was now a factor Doom integrated into a broader operational calculus. He redirected energy attacks, used environmental cover, and closed distance to engage in precise, incapacitating strikes, demonstrating a mastery of combat beyond conventional limits. The engagement escalated into an urban battlefield, with skyscrapers, streets, and infrastructure becoming both tools and obstacles. Doom employed verticality, kinetic manipulation, and environmental awareness to control the flow of combat. Soups attempting to flank or overwhelm him were systematically neutralized through a combination of concussive strikes, tactical displacement, and environmental leverage. Civilians were shielded wherever possible, with the boys coordinating evacuation and intelligence gathering to ensure minimal harm. The juxtaposition between Doom's precision and Vought's reckless aggression highlighted the effectiveness of methodical strategy over brute force. A critical moment occurred when Apex, previously incapacitated and believed neutralized, re-engaged with enhanced regenerative capabilities. Apex's speed and adaptability tested Doom's tactical flexibility. The Slayer anticipated the regenerative cycle, using predictive modeling to exploit brief vulnerabilities during Apex's energy flux. A series of kinetic strikes, environmental manipulation, and controlled displacement incapacitated the soup while avoiding unnecessary destruction. The maneuver exemplified Doom's adaptability, situational awareness, and commitment to operational integrity. Meanwhile, Vought attempted to manipulate public perception in real time. Broadcasts of the battle, selectively edited and amplified through social media bots, painted Doomslayer as a dangerous, uncontrollable threat. Yet the raw footage, captured by drones and civilian devices, undermined their narrative. The Slayer's precision, control, and restraint were evident, fostering growing public recognition of the discrepancy between corporate propaganda and observable reality. The information battlefield became a strategic extension of the physical conflict, with Doom effectively shaping outcomes without engaging directly in the narrative. Within the city's industrial sector, Doom neutralized a coordinated attack designed to collapse a critical bridge. Enhanced soups and mechanized units attempted to force him into a choke point, threatening civilian evacuation routes. Using calculated force, kinetic redirection, and environmental leverage, Doom dismantled the assault, preserving both civilians and infrastructure. The success reinforced his operational principle. Consequence and precision supersede raw power and spectacle. The boys observed, documenting lessons learned for future collaboration, while adapting their improvisational tactics to complement the Slayer's methodology. Vought's internal response grew desperate. Edgar authorized a final escalation. Deployment of soups with energy projection, enhanced durability, and combat coordination rivaling military-grade units. Simultaneously, PR teams escalated disinformation campaigns, framing Doom as a rogue variable whose presence threatened systemic stability. Doomslayer, aware of both physical and informational threats, maintained focus on operational objectives. Each engagement was measured, every decision optimized to neutralize immediate threats, while safeguarding long-term civilian stability and mission success. During a climactic confrontation atop Vought Tower, Homelander and the Slayer faced off directly. Homelander's arrogance was palpable, relying on raw power and intimidation. Doom's approach was calculated and adaptive, exploiting structural vulnerabilities, redirecting kinetic energy, and employing precise strikes designed to incapacitate rather than destroy indiscriminately. Civilians observed from secure vantage points, noting the contrast between Homelander's chaotic aggression and Doom's disciplined, principle-driven engagement. The encounter underscored a fundamental shift in power dynamics. Efficiency, adaptability, and consequence had become dominant factors, challenging traditional notions of soup invincibility. As night fell, the operational landscape shifted. Doomslayer maintained vigilance, neutralizing residual threats, securing evacuation corridors, and monitoring for Vought's next moves. The boys regrouped, assessing both physical and strategic outcomes. Butcher acknowledged the Slayer's mastery, noting, "Every move you make, it's like you're rewriting the rules of engagement." Huey reflected on the ethical complexity of their operations, recognizing that the Slayer's uncompromising methodology demanded careful integration with human oversight. Frenchie analyzed environmental and structural outcomes, preparing for potential future escalations. The day's engagements had profound implications. Doomslayer had not only neutralized immediate threats, but also disrupted Vought's strategic planning, weakened morale, and shifted public perception. Civilians began to perceive a new paradigm. Power was no longer defined solely by superhuman strength or corporate narratives, but by discipline, consequence, and operational mastery. Doomslayer's presence catalyzed a re-evaluation of both morality and strategy in a universe dominated by reckless superhuman power. In the quiet aftermath, atop a secure observation point, Doom's Slayer scanned the cityscape. Residual threats, potential reinforcement vectors, and strategic opportunities were cataloged with precision. His mission remained clear: neutralize dangerous soups, protect civilians, and dismantle the infrastructure of unchecked power. The city, scarred but resilient, bore witness to a new operational reality. Doomslayer had become more than a combatant. He was a catalyst for change, a force capable of recalibrating a world built on spectacle, narrative, and unchecked superhuman dominance. By midweek, the city had descended into what could only be described as controlled chaos. Doomslayer's systematic dismantling of Vaught's infrastructure and soups had left a trail of incapacitated operatives, damaged but strategically intact buildings, and civilians gradually regaining confidence in a protector who did not operate for fame, ego, or corporate profit. The corporation's remaining forces were scattered, morale shattered, and command fractured. Yet Doom knew that complacency was not an option. Operational assessment indicated that Vought still had hidden contingencies, sleeper cells of enhanced soups, and heavily fortified command centers. Neutralizing these threats would require both precise execution and adaptive foresight, qualities Doomslayer possessed in unparalleled measure. The boys had fully integrated into his operational paradigm. Butcher coordinated sabotage and distraction maneuvers, drawing remaining soups into calculated kill zones. Huey monitored civilian density, evacuation routes, and potential collateral damage, feeding real-time updates to Doom's tactical interface. Frenchie manipulated environmental hazards, rigged structural diversions, and amplified kinetic advantages. Their alliance had evolved beyond mere cooperation. It was a unified operational network. Doom's precision and foresight, combined with the boys' adaptive improvisation, formed a hybrid strategy capable of countering every known soup tactic in the city. Vought, desperate to regain control, deployed their most dangerous asset, a soup known only as Apex Prime, an enhanced and genetically optimized version of Apex, paired with mechanized armor and augmented energy projection systems. Apex Prime's first assault was a synchronized combination of extreme speed, kinetic redirection, and targeted energy blasts designed to overwhelm Doomslayer before he could neutralize more conventional threats. The Slayer's sensors instantly assessed each vector of attack, predicted the outcomes of multiple engagement scenarios, and initiated countermeasures that integrated environmental leverage, kinetic displacement, and precise offensive strikes. Apex Prime's enhanced regeneration and armor were formidable, yet Doom's combination of tactical anticipation and adaptive response consistently exploited vulnerabilities in timing, energy output, and spatial positioning. Simultaneously, Homelander re-entered the battlefield, his arrogance and confidence amplified by the presence of Apex Prime. "You cannot control them all," he taunted, his heat vision slicing through concrete barriers with the intention of drawing Doom into reactive overreach. Yet the Slayer remained unshaken, integrating Homelander's attack into his operational calculations. Every strike was anticipated and countered, every potential civilian casualty avoided. Doom's approach was not merely defensive. He was executing a complex, multivariable strategy to systematically isolate, neutralize, and incapacitate the most dangerous soups while maintaining control over the urban battlefield. The engagement became a complex interplay of precision, anticipation, and brutal efficiency. Apex Prime attempted to flank from an elevated position, exploiting height advantage and mobility. Doom countered by manipulating environmental variables, overturned vehicles, structural debris, and improvised barriers to funnel the soup into predictable patterns. Concussive strikes and precise kinetic displacements disabled Apex Prime's armor and destabilized regenerative functions. Homelander, witnessing his operative's incapacitation, escalated his aggression, but Doom's pre-calculated positioning and microsecond reaction times rendered raw power insufficient. The Slayer's combat efficiency had surpassed any conventional expectation within this universe, forcing soups to adapt or be neutralized. During a particularly tense sequence, a large-scale explosion threatened civilian evacuation routes. Doom calculated the trajectory of debris, blast radius, and energy dispersal, acting with unmatched precision to neutralize explosive devices and redirect kinetic energy. Civilians were evacuated unharmed, a testament to the Slayer's unwavering principle. Mission success, without unnecessary loss of life. The boys coordinated in tandem, ensuring structural weaknesses were stabilized, threats disrupted, and intelligence relayed for subsequent tactical decisions. The synergy was operational perfection, a fusion of Doomslayer's calculated lethality and human improvisational strategy. The battle reached a climactic crescendo atop the partially destroyed Vought Tower. Doom engaged Homelander directly, while Apex Prime, partially regenerated and destabilized, launched secondary attacks from adjacent structures. The Slayer's methodology was uncompromising. Every strike calculated, every movement purposeful, every engagement designed to maintain initiative. Homelander's raw power was formidable, yet ineffective against a combatant whose predictive modeling, environmental awareness, and tactical adaptability exceeded the soup's understanding. The duel was not merely physical. It was an operational chess match, with the city as the board, civilians as variables, and every structural element a potential tool or threat. At the critical moment, Doom executed a sequence that neutralized Homelander's flight advantage, redirected kinetic energy from Apex Prime's regenerative bursts, and incapacitated both threats without causing irreversible civilian casualties. The execution was precise, methodical, and decisive. Homelander was contained, Apex Prime incapacitated, and the remaining soups either neutralized or captured. The city, scarred but operational, had survived the most intense confrontation in its recent history. Doomslayer's presence had fundamentally altered the calculus of power in this universe. Efficiency, adaptability, and consequence had become dominant over spectacle and arrogance. In the aftermath, Doom surveyed the battlefield. Operational analysis indicated residual threats, sleeper operatives, compromised infrastructure, and potential external reinforcement vectors. The boys regrouped, exhausted but functional, observing the implications of Doom's intervention. Butcher remarked, "You didn't just win. You changed the rules. Nobody walks into a fight like that here." Huey reflected on the ethical consequences of absolute precision and moral clarity amidst chaos. Frenchie analyzed structural outcomes, preparing for continued intervention if Vought attempted reconstitution. The city, despite the physical scars, had experienced a paradigm shift. Civilians now recognized that unchecked superhuman power could be challenged, and that a force operating on principle, precision, and consequence could achieve outcomes previously thought impossible. Doomslayer's methodology had introduced a new operational standard, one that integrated lethal efficiency, environmental mastery, and strategic foresight. The implications were profound. The balance of power in this universe had been irrevocably altered, and Vought International's dominance was now contested not merely by brute force, but by calculated, principle-driven intervention. As night fell, Doomslayer remained vigilant. His sensors scanned for residual threats, potential reinforcements, and operational vulnerabilities. The boys, observing from nearby vantage points, documented outcomes, strategized for future operations, and reflected on the Slayer's impact. The battle had concluded in tactical victory, but the strategic landscape remained dynamic. Doom's presence was no longer an anomaly. It had become a catalyst for systemic change. The city, and indeed the universe of soups, had been irrevocably transformed by his uncompromising approach to conflict, consequence, and principle. In the days following the collapse of Vought Tower's authority, the city existed in a fragile state of recalibration. Streets were quieter, not from peace, but from uncertainty. The public no longer trusted the myths that had once defined their reality. Soups no longer walked openly with the assurance of untouchable power. Vaught's branding machines had fallen silent, their corporate narratives fractured by raw footage, eyewitness accounts, and undeniable evidence of systematic abuse. At the center of this upheaval stood Doomslayer, not as a ruler, not as a savior in the traditional sense, but as an immovable constant whose presence forced accountability where none had existed before. Doomslayer's operational tempo slowed, not from fatigue, but from strategic necessity. With the primary threats neutralized, his focus shifted toward stabilization rather than eradication. He monitored remaining soups, cataloging behavioral changes, threat potential, and likelihood of recidivism. Some attempted to flee the city, abandoning identities built on fear and fame. Others retreated into obscurity, stripped of corporate protection, and unwilling to test themselves against the armored figure who had dismantled their hierarchy. Doom did not pursue indiscriminately. His mission parameters had always been clear. Eliminate active threats to civilian life and dismantle systems that enabled unchecked violence. With Vought's command structure shattered, further escalation would only destabilize civilian recovery. The boys found themselves navigating unfamiliar territory. For the first time, they were not reacting to a disaster or scrambling to contain collateral damage. They were operating in the aftermath of a decisive victory, one achieved without compromise, without bargaining, and without illusion. Butcher struggled with this reality more than the others. Vengeance had always been his driving force, yet Doomslayer's methods left little room for personal hatred. He doesn't hate them, Butcher muttered one evening, watching Doom scan the skyline. That's what scares me. He just ends them when they cross the line. Huey, by contrast, saw something else entirely. He observed the way civilians looked at Doomslayer, not with worship, but with cautious trust. Children pointed from behind windows, adults whispered in low tones, and emergency responders nodded in silent acknowledgement. Doom did not speak to them, did not reassure them, yet his presence alone altered their behavior. Huey realized that Doom represented a form of justice untainted by ego or spectacle. It was terrifying, yes, but also honest. Maybe this is what accountability looks like, Huey said quietly to Annie during a late-night perimeter check. No speeches. No branding. Just consequences. Frenchie focused on the practical realities. With Vought weakened, power vacuums were forming rapidly. Black market Compound V distribution spiked, Rogue Lab surfaced, and independent soups began offering protection services to the highest bidders. Doomslayer identified these trends almost immediately. He initiated targeted operations, precise, surgical strikes against production facilities, distribution hubs, and armed enforcers exploiting the chaos. Each intervention was swift and decisive, leaving infrastructure dismantled, but civilians unharmed. Word spread quickly. The armored figure was not gone. He was watching. One evening, deep within the ruins of an underground Vought research complex, Doomslayer uncovered something unexpected. Data logs revealed experimental programs designed to replicate superhuman resilience through cybernetic augmentation rather than Compound V. The research was incomplete, unstable, and grotesquely unethical, but it demonstrated a dangerous truth. Even without soups, humanity would continue to chase power without restraint. Doom stood motionless in the dim light of flickering terminals, processing the information. The enemy was not merely superhumans. It was the systems that rewarded domination without consequence. His mission parameters expanded, not emotionally, but logically. The threat was systemic. Homelander remained alive, contained in a reinforced facility under constant surveillance. Stripped of public adoration and corporate insulation, he deteriorated rapidly. Rage replaced confidence. Paranoia replaced entitlement. Doomslayer visited the facility once, not to threaten, not to interrogate, but to observe. Homelander screamed behind reinforced barriers, demanding recognition, validation, fear. Doom offered none. The encounter lasted less than 30 seconds. Yet when Doom turned and walked away, Homelander fell silent. For the first time in his life, he had been dismissed as irrelevant. That moment marked a turning point. Soups across the city and beyond began to understand a new reality. Power no longer guaranteed dominance. Visibility no longer ensured safety. A being existed who did not care about narratives, who could not be intimidated, and who would act without hesitation if a line was crossed. Doomslayer had become a deterrent, not through fear alone, but through certainty. The boys debated their future. Without Vought as a centralized enemy, their mission had changed. But Doomslayer did not issue commands or expectations. He simply continued operating, offering cooperation when objectives aligned and indifference when they did not. Eventually, Butcher made the decision they all sense coming. We can't follow him forever, he admitted. But we can make sure the world he leaves behind doesn't slide right back into hell. Doom acknowledged this with a single nod. Their paths diverged, not as allies breaking apart, but as forces choosing different fronts in the same war. As weeks passed, the city stabilized. Emergency services regained structure. Independent oversight committees formed, armed with evidence Vought could never erase. Soups were regulated, monitored, and in some cases depowered through legal and medical intervention. It was imperfect, fragile, and vulnerable to corruption, but it existed. And looming over it all was the knowledge that Doomslayer remained somewhere nearby, watching silently, intervening only when necessary. One night, standing atop a silent skyscraper, Doomslayer scanned the horizon. His mission in this universe was not complete, but it was no longer immediate. Threat levels had dropped below critical thresholds. Civilian casualty projections stabilized. For the first time since his arrival, long-range dimensional anomalies registered faintly on his sensors. The gateway that had brought him here was not reopening, but another path was forming. Doom calculated probabilities, outcomes, and consequences. Whether he stayed or moved on, the impact was irreversible. This universe would never return to what it was. The Doomslayer did not conquer the boy's universe. He did not rule it, reshape it in his image, or impose his will upon its people. Instead, he did something far more unsettling. He exposed it. He revealed the fragile lies beneath celebrity heroism, the rot beneath corporate control, and the danger of power without consequence. By existing within this world, by acting with absolute clarity and uncompromising precision, he forced every faction to confront what they truly were. Vought fell not because Doom destroyed every building or killed every soup, but because their mythology could not survive contact with a force that could not be bought, manipulated, or intimidated. The boys survived not because they were stronger, but because they adapted, learning that rage alone was not enough, and that true accountability demanded discipline. Civilians endured not because they were protected by heroes, but because someone finally treated their lives as the central variable in every equation. Doomslayer's legacy in this universe was not one of fear, but of certainty. Lines were drawn, consequences were enforced, and for the first time, power answered to something greater than itself. Whether Doom remained or eventually departed, the damage and the hope he left behind could not be undone. This world had learned brutal, necessary truth. Monsters are not defined by strength, but by choice. And somewhere in the shadows, the armored sentinel watched, waiting for the next threat foolish enough to test the line he had drawn.